Alright guys, I'm back for one more post this week. I only have 2 asks as of when I'm recording this, so they will not take me that long to go over. I'm going to add in something that I found a few days ago. I kind of got sucked into Pinterest and was looking at a combination of memes. I was looking at, TWD memes and also Lord of the Rings memes and also Supernatural memes and just being very entertained, And I saw a couple of them here that I ended up sending them to my fellow theorists, and we had a little bit of a discussion about it, and I just figured I could share them here too, because it's actually a really interesting discussion, part of it about Beth. Now, the first one was this one with Daryl and Maggie, and this just made me laugh. I mean, we all know that people were really angry with Maggie during season 5 for not really looking for Beth. So I was like scrolling, and I saw the top part where Daryl's saying, "Don't worry, I'll find Beth." And when I scrolled down and she said who, I just busted up laughing. I just thought that was so funny. I do think, this has been discussed to death, but I think they had a reason for doing that. It wasn't so that Maggie could hate on Beth. I think it was because they were focusing on the romance angle. So Maggie was looking for Gwen, and Daryl needed to be in the same sphere of Beth, but without Maggie. So I just think they didn't want to dilute that storyline by having people go, yeah, but her sister's looking for her. They need to go find her sister. No, they wanted everybody focused on the romance angle. So anyway, that's not anything really big. I just thought it was funny. So the second one is this one. And this is interesting because we know now that peanut butter is a symbol for Beth, in case you don't remember, in Alone, when they're in the funeral home and they find the food in the cupboard, Daryl picks up the jelly and Beth picks up the peanut butter. And that works really well because they're peanut butter and jelly, which means they're complementary. They go together. It's pretty obvious symbolism. But anytime that we see peanut butter, we now kind of equate it with Beth. And I'm not going to remember all of the times we saw it. The one that comes to mind is when Daryl was trying to escape from the sanctuary and he got into Dwight's room. And there was a lot of interesting Beth symbols in there. And he eats some peanut butter. And it's mostly because he hasn't eaten and he needs the fuel so that he can, fight his way out and everything. And it's really interesting, actually, because outside of the show, Norman actually said that he hates peanut butter. So you can see him maybe saying, hey, can I eat something else? Like, can I not eat peanut butter? I'll eat anything else. I just don't like it, But they made him eat the peanut butter. And it's because they want that as a symbol, right? So that is some Beth symbolism going on. And I think that has to do with, we don't know for sure what it has to do with, but I think it probably has to do with the CRM or whatever organization she is imprisoned to. And if you think about it this way, Daryl was trying to escape from them. Rick was definitely trying to escape from the CRM at various times, and I think Beth will see her trying to escape from places. So I think it has something to do with that, somewhere in that realm of understanding. But this, picture that they have is actually from 409 after, when this is like the pudding house, right, with Carl. So I'm just going to read you what I wrote, what it made me think of. I'm pretty sure someone has pointed this out to me before, but it's one of those details that, while it's familiar, I had pretty much forgotten about. The really funny thing here is that I don't think this was made by a TDer. It's just someone who thought this was funny, and they're pointing it out. They have no idea that this is actually a major potent Beth symbol. So my first surface analysis is that it's simply Gimple equating Beth with Carl here. I do think most of what happens at the pudding house is very specifically about Carl's arc, and I'll get more into that in a minute. But this peanut butter is also proof that they're entangling Beth with him somehow. And I don't think the idea here is that the same stuff they're foreshadowing for Carl will also happen for Beth. There's a clear foreshadow of Carl's death arc here, but rather that Beth is entangled with Carl in an adjacent or tertiary way. I almost want to be literal and say that the writers are keeping Beth unseen in a box until after Carl's arc plays out and he's fulfilled his time as junior sheriff. Now, before I go on, remember that in this house, he does also see a cage with a bird outside it that's dead. Now, there's 2 things I think that probably foreshadows. I always thought that was a foreshadow of Grady, because we saw a cage in Beth's cell, and she was the songbird, and when she was trying to leave Grady, that's when she gets shot, and, as far as the audience is concerned, as far as Carl is concerned, dies. And what he sees is a bird outside its cage, as though it was trying to get out of the cage, and then it dies right outside the cage. So I was like, okay, that's clearly a foreshadow of Grady. And it doesn't bother me that he doesn't see the bird resurrect or anything, because again, I think that foreshadows what happens in Coda. It doesn't necessarily foreshadow anything beyond that. So it's, they're just not dealing with the resurrection foreshadow here. They're only dealing with the Coda foreshadowing. The other thing, though, is that at the time, and for several seasons after this, we didn't know that Carl was going to die. So this is actually the episode where he's fighting the walker outside, and the shot, the way that they did the film and the shot of him fighting the walker is exactly the same way they did it when he's actually bitten in season 8. So that's a clear omen of his death, and that makes me think that the bird may also be an omen of Carl's death. So what I've come to realize is that everything that happens here is a foreshadow of Carl's whole arc. And really, we probably should have thought of that before, because everything that happens in season 4 is a foreshadow of arcs to come for many seasons, and we've seen that in a lot of the other storylines, obviously Beth and Daryl, but also Rick and Michonne, also others. They used season 4 as a way to foreshadow the arcs that they knew were going to take several seasons to play out. So if you think of what happens with Carl, he goes out on his own, and at first he's very angry. Let me get back to what I'm saying here. So I started thinking more about the whole pudding house sequence, which I haven't watched in some time. What occurred to me is that Carl starts out very angry. This is like the Carl Papa moment that everybody made fun of when he's screaming at Rick while Rick sleeps. Then he strikes out on his own. He has a bunch of frustrations and struggles, fighting walkers and such, but eventually, after defeating the one that takes his shoe, he reaches a point of what you might call zen. He's suddenly very happy and confident, and things are working out for him. And I think this represents Carl's whole arc. He starts out as an angry teenager, an angry kid even, but eventually reaches this transcendent zen place before he is bitten and dies. I also can't help but wonder about the shoe symbolism here. Carl doesn't actually fit the mold of the lost shoe or foot symbolism, even though we clearly see him lose his shoe here. He doesn't disappear from the narrative and return. That's usually what happens when we see the lost shoe symbolism. Somebody disappears and is separated from their loved ones in Team Family, and then eventually they reunite with them. But this instance is also very different from any other. In all other cases I know of, the person loses their shoe on the run or in a fight. They just keep going and don't look back. It's a very Cinderella moment. But here, Carl has time to stop and reflect, even write a note, which is a little bit like Beth. It's almost like he steps outside the narrative or cracks the fourth wall and becomes self-aware for just a minute. Which makes me wonder if the shoe symbolism here is really more about Beth than him. I'm not sure I can explain it in a super logical way, but here the walker got his shoe, not him. Later in season 8, the walker won't get his shoe, it will actually get him, right? When it bites him. So I almost feel like this part where he says, the part where he's fighting the walker in the room, I almost feel like that too is a foreshadow of his death, but in this case he gets away, whereas in season 8 he doesn't. Another way to look at it is that Beth will disappear from the narrative here in season 4 or 5, but Carl will not. Later in season 8, Carl will disappear from the narrative permanently, and Beth, the unseen peanut butter that was hiding in the box, will return to it. Anyway, like I said, it's just random thoughts about the pudding house sequence. Also, I asked both Google and ChatGPT what the symbolic nature of pudding is. These are questions that only TDers ask, right? I really expected them to tell me I was an idiot and not to quit my day job, but Google actually came up with something really interesting. It gave me some information about the symbolism of Christmas pudding. Christmas pudding typically has, that's supposed to be 13 ingredients, it's a typo, to represent Christ and his 12 disciples. It was also supposed to be stirred from east to west to symbolize the journey of the wise men to visit baby Jesus. And I wondered if we had ever explored the east symbols in the show as a tribute to the wise men. I'm not sure if anybody's done that. But obviously Carl did not eat Christmas pudding. His was chocolate. But I'm wondering if it could be TWD's version of Christmas pudding. And that would be him almost consuming or paying tribute to the true Christ figure of the show, which will be Beth, and she's the peanut butter that's hanging out in the corner that he walks by. So I don't know. It's just something that I was kind of thinking about and had some thoughts about. So some of my fellow theorists then came back with some thoughts. Gladriel Jones says, I love this. I remember seeing the box of peanut butter when I rewatched a couple of months ago. It was so weird, they're packing up Beth's side of the narrative sandwich and putting it in storage for later. The shoe symbolism and pudding stuff are also cool. Admittedly, I'm still kind of confused by the show symbolism. I have thought of it being a Cinderella thing, maybe a symbol of transformation. I really like this idea of Carl stepping outside the fourth wall because stopping and starting time are major themes in season 4 and 5. Also, she tells us this is kind of a different topic, but they do have a Daryl Dixon Comic-Con planned for the San Diego Comic-Con. So we kind of figured there would be, but it's official now. Then W.D. Way says this. Now, about the peanut butter. I'm pretty sure we talked about this at some point, maybe several times over the years. This is from 4-9 After, and I'm realizing just now that this is our first hint of peanut butter being something more than just peanut butter. We could not tie it to Beth until 4 episodes later when we are shown in Alone that Beth is peanut butter and Daryl is jelly. Both very good by themselves, but together they are a wonderful combination. We did not connect the peanut butter as a symbol of Beth until we were doing rewatches. This means that this was definitely a foreshadowing of that symbol. With that in mind, looking at this box of the peanut butter, on top of it is a black cloth. To me, that is a symbol of mourning a loss, and we can see next to it that a mailing label, which means the peanut butter is either being sent somewhere or has been received from somewhere far enough that it has to be mailed. The other thing I'm thinking is that the powers that be want us to look, or want us to see that the box is open. A box could be looked at as a safe holding place for the peanut butter. The box being opened, I'm thinking it's kind of like it's no longer closed in. It is open. The peanut butter can leave the box now, much like Beth leaving the trunk of a car. Again, foreshadowing. One last thought this reminds me of is throughout the series, there is a truck that has been repainted and used so many times that is of the same shape as a mail truck, a large mail truck. We first saw it at the prison. It's in the background of several scenes and has been repainted and reworked for the episode Alone as an ice cream truck that Maggie sleeping/playing dead in front of when Sasha saw her from the window. The most recent time we saw the mail truck was at the Commonwealth when Eugene was getting ice cream and first saw Max. Can we think of this truck as being a type of mail carrier of clues of Beth? So yeah, this is a lot to unpack, and this is really great. So what W.D. Way is saying with the mail thing is, I have a communication theory and I've got a mailbox theory from a long time ago, and it mostly stemmed from 603 when Daryl was looking for Rick. So it was during Operation Lead the Walkers Away, and he heard gunshots and knew that Rick was in trouble. So he's flying around on his motorcycle looking for Rick, and he passes so many mailboxes. I don't even know how many. Like, go back and count them. We keep seeing him passing mailboxes, and we came to realize that this is something of a theme. We've also got the mail truck that we see a lot and that she mentions here. And then it kind of became almost like part of a larger communication theme. So we've kind of lumped it in some ways with the radio, because they're just different ways of communicating with people. Snail mail, sending messages over long distances, it kind of all ends up being the same. Morse code could actually fall into that. Anyway, but it's also a way perhaps of talking about travel over a long distance. Cars are a big symbol of Beth, and and there's like this whole transportation theme going on. So anyway, these are just really interesting symbols that we haven't really deep dived into before. But the point is, if we go back to what I've said before about how when Carl died, his mantle of being the next sheriff, of inheriting Rick's leadership, was going to pass to somebody else, because Carl's not going to be there anymore, and it's very clearly going to be Beth because of 416, where Rick puts the hat on her, and the fact that the hat keeps falling off Carl, right? And then Rick picks it up off the ground and puts it on Beth. This is just another way to foreshadow that. The fact that it's really obvious to us now that peanut butter is a symbol of Beth, and as Carl's walking around and doing all these kind of random things in the episode, which we can now see in hindsight foreshadow his arc, it's like Beth is waiting there in the wings, and once he does die, she'll be there to take over the mantle. Now, it's true that he died a few seasons ago and we have not seen her yet, but I think that's more of a logistical thing, where they just haven't brought her back yet because of COVID and because of things getting pushed back and everything that we've always talked about. But I think we're very close to seeing her now with all of the suspicious stuff that's been going on, and Daryl Dixon season 2 being on the horizon. So yeah, I'll put up some pictures that W.D. Way put up of the mail truck, and also in this episode we have Carl fighting with the walkers, and while he's fighting with them, we see another instance of his hat falling off. So super, super interesting stuff. I just thought I'd share that little conversation with you. It's pretty typical of the types of conversations me and my fellow theorists have. One of us will just notice something and then we'll hash out a conversation. Sometimes I'll mention them to you guys. A lot of times I don't, because I'm busy doing other things, but a lot of the information that I give you in these asks come from these conversations and things that we've pointed out to each other and things that we've hashed out and go, okay, well, that makes sense. File that under this theory, file that under this aspect, and then I can talk about it when you guys ask questions about it. All right, let's go over these other 2 asks that I have right now. I am recording these in advance, and because I'm out of town all this week, but by the time this last one posts, I will probably be back. All right. Hey, I've seen the tweet from Erik Jensen talking about events in Grady and France circulating in the TD tags, which is super suspicious, LOL. Do you think it's possible that the CRM or maybe another community that Grady was in contact with sent Edwards in France to work on a cure or the variant, and Beth went with him? The cure would make more sense considering the bite cure theory. Also, as much as I love the theory of Beth surviving a walker bite, don't you think it would be too much for the GA that Beth survived a bite, a headshot, and then ended up in France where Daryl is? When you say it that way, yeah, it does sound like a lot. Like, I would love it, but I'm not sure that non-TDers would, because it's sound a bit like Beth is some kind of Terminator, LOL. So it just depends on how they spin it, I think. Let me address the Grady tweet first and France. So I saw that too, circulating in the tags a little while ago, and I looked it up because when I first saw it, I thought it was recent. And I was like, are you kidding me? He said that? And then I looked at it, and the tweet is actually from 2017. So it is older. It's not something that he said very recently. But the biggest thing that's going to stand out from so long ago then is France, because there was no hint, none whatsoever, that the show was ever going to be in France back in 2017, and certainly not in 2015. And Erik Jensen knew that. He knew that it was going to be in France, which means, like, to me, that's confirmation that all of the Grady actors, the reason that they drop so many hints for us is they know everything, guys. You know, we always say, well, maybe the side actors who just play a smaller part, maybe they don't know. And that could be true of other side actors, but the ones who are at Grady, who were part of that storyline, they clearly know. They know the plan. They know where it's going. That's why they're always dropping hints. And it's because they were in that storyline, right? So if you have another side actor that was in it for 3 episodes, part of the Whisper storyline, and that's it, then yeah, maybe they don't know. But these actors, they clearly know. If Erik Jensen knew France, then they all knew what was going on and when she was going to come back, and it would be in conjunction with the France storyline. So that's a big deal. It really is. And that's super cool. That makes me really, really happy. As to what they're going to do with it, like I said, it just depends on how they spin it. Like, when you say it that way, it does sound like a lot. It does sound a little bit unbelievable. But what if it's something more like, she got shot, they went and picked up her body, her body, she was really alive, they went and got her. And, because of that, when Team Family came back, she wasn't there. But what if they knew people in France who were really good doctors and thought they could send her there and maybe she could live? Then she ends up in France. You know what I mean? In that case, it would almost make more sense that she ended up there than that Daryl ended up there. What if they assumed she would die because they didn't think her head, even though they went and picked up her body, and by this I mean the Gradians or whoever took her, or whoever, wherever she went, that she wasn't there when Team Family returned to look for her. What if they got her because they had been doing experiments on people at Grady, because she had certain, substances in her blood that they wanted to test, but they're still assuming that she's not going to live because she did get shot in the head. And so they send her more as a Walker test subject to the CRM, so she gets shipped overseas. But then she ends up surviving. You know what I mean? There's a lot of ways they could spin it that would just make it pretty logical. And then we have the fact that we don't actually know who the guys were that took Daryl, that put him on the boat, and they ended up in France. I mean, the boat blew up, he jumped off, he ended up in France, but it's not like if they were headed for Japan, he would suddenly end up in France. The reason that he washed up in France is because they were headed for France anyway. So by the time he jumped off the boat, the tides were just going to take him there, which means they were headed that way. So maybe the same people who took him were the same people who were in contact with Grady, and he just ended up in the same place that Beth ended up because of this. You know what I mean? Like, they could... I think they probably already have laid the groundwork for it enough that when they explain it to us, it's going to make a lot of sense. But because we don't have all of the puzzle pieces yet, it just seems like it's random and it's coming from all over the place, from out in left field. But I think when we get all the information, it's going to make a lot of sense. It's not going to feel like it's out of left field. So yeah, I hear you, but I think that once it all comes together, I think most people will be fine with it. And, even if they're not, even if they say, yeah, but that's still a little bit unrealistic, it's fiction. And everybody wants Daryl to finally meet his soulmate and his love interest. So I'm positive they will be, with the exception of, the haters and the shippers who don't want him to be with Beth. Other than those people, the rest of the audience, even if there's a little bit of unreality in it, I mean, it's The Walking Dead, there's unreality in it anyway, and I'm sure that they will suspend their disbelief just because they want to see what happens when Daryl and Beth come back together. So, yeah, we're of course going to get hate from the haters, but other than them, I think the audience will be just fine with it. Last one. I love Norman, but he does tend to blow things up. He said the season 5 finale would be mind-blowing, and we would be screaming at our TVs, grabbing our tissues, and it was a total letdown. Morgan showed up, and Rick killed Pete. Man, I'm having a hard time speaking. And... oh, you're saying and? So when he says the finale for season 2 is the best thing in TWD history, I'm like, sure, Jan. Well, I hear you. I do. And we do know that there's been some hyperbole in the past. But, I mean, keep in mind that, number one, it's part of his contract to hype the show. Number two, I mean, there were things about season 5 finale that was shocking. I think you just kind of try to look at it from outside the TD box sometimes, because pretty much every season finale has been a little bit of a letdown for us because we wanted to see Beth. And so if she wasn't there, then we were like, oh, that kind of sucked, you know. Back in season 5, there were people who thought that she would return by the season 5 finale. And now we look back at that and laughed and go, oh, you sweet summer child, it was never going to be that soon. But we thought, there's a lot of people who thought she would. In fact, I've told the story before about how I actually didn't start my account until after that, because I was just reading theories online and I didn't really see any reason to create my own account because there were plenty of other people posting about it. But once the season 5 finale hit and she didn't come back, I just saw people hopping off the train left, right, and center and giving up and saying she wasn't going to come back. And I was going, guys, no, just because she's not back now doesn't mean she won't be back. The symbolism hasn't gone anywhere, Anyway, so, I mean, what did happen would still have been a big deal to some fans, I mean, the thing with Pete, everybody pretty much wanted him to die because he was a douchebag, but there was a lot of drama going on there. Him and Rick got in a fight when they broke out of the window, and then everybody was waiting to see what would happen because Deanna, both her sons were killed, or no, just one of them had been killed at that point. Everyone was kind of waiting to see if she was going to kick them out of Alexandria. I mean, there was just a lot of tension going on. So if you weren't looking for Beth to come back, if you weren't, having the same mindset as RTDers, that still would have been pretty tense, and you might have been really paying close attention to the TV. Morgan was the other thing that was a really big deal. And I mean, I know that most of us aren't nearly as invested in Morgan and Rick as we are in Beth and Daryl. I mean, obviously. But Morgan and Rick coming face to face was a big deal. That was a really big deal. They hadn't been face to face since season 3, since Clear. And of course, we had known Morgan was around since the coda of 501, but this was him finally getting there. And then there's the stuff with Daryl and Aaron in the Wolf Trap. I actually really love that storyline. There's a lot of Beth symbolism there. And there was the really cool Walker kill where Daryl used the chain and took off 3 Walker heads. So there was a lot going on. And I think Norman was just proud of that and thinking it was going to be really suspenseful. And on some levels it was. So I don't think he was lying, and I don't think he was trying to use hyperbole. He was just trying to hype what was there. And for some people, it really was a big deal, and that was a cool season finale. But I do understand what you mean. For most of us, it was a letdown just because we didn't see what we hoped to see. But in terms of Daryl Dixon season 2, I will also say that even if he has overhyped things in the past, he's never said this before. He's never said the finale of this season is the best thing we've ever filmed. He's never said that before. So that still makes me think that it's going to be something different than we've ever seen before. And here's hoping that it's him finding out about Beth. So yeah, I mean, I do understand what you're saying. I see it both ways, but it doesn't bother me that much. I do think that whatever happens in the season finale is going to be really big and really great. So I'm excited for it myself. But thank you for sharing that. And I do like your sure, Jan. That made me smile. All right, guys. That is all I have for now, but I will be back next week. Everyone have a fabulous, fabulous week, and I will talk to you soon.